The worst day in the history of ESPN.
Disney once again laying people off, this time folks on TV on ESPN, the anchors getting the axe.
20 plus people laid off.
Everybody's on the chopping block.
They're looking to save money everywhere they can, and so yeah, a lot of big names.
Blindsiding a 17-year employee.
I will remind everybody they're casualties of a layoff because ESPN lost $5.5 billion.
More recognizable faces are now going to be in independent spaces. Pat McAfee, etc., can go direct to consumer.
The way the industry is moving, I don't know if quality is what's going to keep people around anyway.
This show is more entertaining than anything on ESPN.
This is where we are at as an industry. It's saddening, and the turn we are taking is for the worse.
We are now firmly in an era where individual personal brands in sports media are king, and they supersede pretty much everything else, including the corporate brands of the networks that employ those people. If you look at everything that's happened at ESPN over the last month or so, with signing Pat McAfee to a mega deal, which he left an even bigger deal with FanDuel to take that deal with ESPN, and you kind of overlay that with the unfortunate layoffs that happened at the same time, and it can kind of feel weird, seeing the dichotomy of a whole bunch of talent get let go while at the same time they signed one talent for a lot of money. And I understand where those mixed feelings come from and why there's a lot of confusion about the state of sports media. And as somebody who used to work in sports TV for a long time, I was in the trenches as a PA at NFL Network, cutting highlights, being in the control room for NFL Red Zone, doing graphics on Red Zone for years, working on virtually every single show that existed at that network at some point in time. And also at the same time doing local sports media at Time Warner Sportsnet, which was later Spectrum Sportsnet, doing like Lakers coverage, Dodgers coverage, Galaxy, CONCACAF, all that kind of stuff. Even going back to my time in high school, I started doing field cam work when I was 16. I started doing technical directing and directing when I was 17. So I spent a lot of my life in sports TV. And then I left all of that to do YouTube for also almost a decade at this point. So I've been on both sides of the fence here. I have watched this transition happen, literally even to myself. So I feel like I'm in a unique position to kind of comment on the state of sports media and maybe give a little bit of context of what's actually happening at ESPN, or at least what I think is happening at ESPN. First things first, I do want to express as much empathy as I possibly can for everybody that did unfortunately recently get let go at ESPN. It was, I think it was 20 total on-air talent got let go. A lot of them, yes, were in very expensive contracts. They were making great money, and I kind of don't think that matters. And my buddy Brandon Perna made a great point when he did his video about this topic, that for a lot of the folks that were on-air talent at ESPN that were not former professional athletes themselves, being on air at ESPN is literally their dream job. Like, that is the pinnacle of the profession. That is what you work for, is to be an on-air talent at ESPN. And they had that. And unfortunately, they got let go. And so these are people that literally, in many cases, lost their dream job. And regardless of the dollar amount of their contract, I think that it just sucks, right? Like, nobody wants to go through that. And so I empathize with that, because it's a very hard thing to have everything you wanted and then have it slip through your fingers. So I want to express empathy first and foremost for those people, but I also want to explain the network perspective on why those layoffs were probably necessary from Disney's perspective. I do not believe that Disney would have made those cuts unless they absolutely had to, because typically, at least in this business, if a contract is not generating the revenue that they need in order to pay for that contract, they're just going to let it expire, right? But these were outright layoffs. They were ending these contracts early. And I don't think they would have done that if Disney Plus was not losing literally $1.5 billion a year. Like, Disney Plus has been a disaster for them financially for a lot of reasons, and there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube that kind of dive into why Disney Plus has failed, but that has had an impact on the entire company as a whole. And so in order to make ESPN profitable, there's really only two paths they can take. The first path is obviously, hiring talent that they think is going to bring in enough eyeballs to generate ad dollars so they can be profitable. And the second path is cutting expenses, which means cutting talent that they do not believe is bringing in enough eyeballs to generate enough ad dollars to pay for those salaries. And I do want to make a point here that these are two separate paths and two separate decisions. They're not necessarily linked together. There's not some salary cap that Disney has to adhere to where, oh, we have to cut all these contracts so that we can bring in Pat McAfee. It's really more like we're bringing in Pat McAfee because we need somebody that can generate eyeballs and get money injected into this company again through advertising. And at the same time, unfortunately, we need to get rid of contracts that we do not believe are bringing in revenue, hence the layoffs. All these people that got laid off, I don't think that they would have got laid off if Disney felt that they were a plus on the balance sheet. As callous as that sounds, they need to make money. They need to be profitable because Disney Plus is just an anchor on the entire Disney business, globally. Disney Plus is dragging everything down. So ESPN has to make money, and I think that those are the two paths that they're taking simultaneously. Now, for everyone else that is still at ESPN or FS1 or NBC or print media or any other outlet, right? Anybody that's in sports media, and I know a lot of them are probably going to watch this because I know many of them all across these different outlets, so I'm sure a lot of them are going to see this video at some point. If you're watching this and you're in the industry, I want you to be aware of where sports media is right now from a consumer perspective. Let's talk about what actually works in modern sports media and why a lot of legacy outlets are now having to play catch up with new media like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and all the hundreds of creators that are slowly but surely ripping eyeballs away from those networks. With the rise of all these different social media platforms, sports fans now have more options than ever for where they consume their sports content. Yes, they could turn on a debate show in the morning while they're getting ready for work, which, let's be honest, that format now is basically just background noise while people make their coffee and toast a bagel. But if they don't like the debate format, they don't have to watch that anymore. They're not locked in to network television. They can get a million different things from a million different sources. If they still want live sports content in the morning that's a little bit more lighthearted and not so combative, they could throw on Pat McAfee. If they want something that's edited or pre-recorded that just kind of lives on YouTube, they can watch Tom Grossi's 30 and 30 series every morning. They can throw on Brandon Perna. They can watch The Pivot. They can watch Flemlow. If they want fantasy content specifically, like on-demand fantasy content because they're getting ready for their drafts, they can watch the Underdog Fantasy channel. They can watch BDGE. If they want Madden content to get ready for the Madden release coming up, they can watch Bengal. There's so many options now. They don't have to watch First Take if they don't want to watch First Take. This is not the 90s anymore. The audience is no longer captive. And I feel like it's taken a lot of legacy media outlets, in particular TV networks, it's taken them way too long to catch on to that fact. For the first time ever, ESPN has to truly convince sports fans to watch their content over the hundreds of other content creators now that are making stuff for free. They never had to do that before, and they've kind of had to change their entire content strategy as a result. And again, they're doing it a lot later than they should have, but I at least do want to give them credit for finally catching up. And everything that they've done over the last 3 weeks, by the way, in my opinion, is part of that new content strategy. ESPN is now kind of taking a step back, and they're not focusing so much on having the network brand be at the forefront, and instead they're letting individual talent brands take the spotlight. And here's what I mean by individual talent brands, by the way. Part of my job is trying to understand how people work, how they prioritize their time, how they make buying decisions, really how they make any decision. Because at the end of the day, my job through content creation is to try to convince you to spend as much time out of your day with me as I can, rather than spending it with ESPN. That is literally what my job is. I am competing for your attention. And I can't compete for your attention without having a personal brand. I mean, 4 years ago, why do you think that I started going on camera all of a sudden? I needed a differentiating factor for my brand. At the time, and even more since then, there were a lot of channels popping up on YouTube, and it's just been kind of a growing category over the last several years. But there were a lot of channels that were popping up that were doing similar things to what I was doing, in the sense that we were all, analyzing all 22 and kind of giving our takes based on tape study. And we were all just kind of doing like faceless voiceover, and they're all phenomenal. Like Alex Rollins is great. Sam Gold is great. Thinking Football, Billy Stevens. Like I watch all their stuff every single week. Like it's a great group of people, but we all make very similar content. And all of our videos were kind of blending together, right? And I just had to differentiate myself somehow so that my brand would stick out amongst a lot of channels that were doing similar things. Hence, me going on camera. And to a degree, I do think that gambit did work. And I'll be honest, early on, I was terrified of being on camera. Like I did not want to do it. I was extremely nervous. Hence why I oftentimes back then had a drink every single show, because I couldn't do it on camera without that. Like I needed something to kind of like calm my nerves. And obviously I've kind of kept that as part of my brand, right? Kind of having the bar and whiskey and cocktails and everything be part of my episodes. But like literally the reason why that started was because I needed it to get through filming on camera. That was how nervous I was. But I had to do it. And you got to do what you got to do to differentiate yourself and build your brand. And I don't regret it at all. For all of the newer creators that are watching this, so I'm going to give like one piece of advice here. Your brand is not just what you make, it's how you make people feel when they watch what you make. So, when I'm spending an entire day putting LEDs inside this cabinet and rigging up all these different lights and trying to get the exact right lens that I need and make this shot as good as I possibly can as like my home shot. I should throw up a picture here of like what this set actually looks like. Like this is a set. It's my office, but it is a set, because I'm trying to create a feeling when you watch my content. And that's what really builds a brand. Is it's not just making content, it's making your audience attribute a certain feeling to your content. If we look at the brands of not all, but like most debate show personalities, they're very animated. They can be very combative at times. Like even though it's all a show, it's performance, right? It can be very combative. It can be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. And the energy can get real negative sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's all a show. And sometimes it does feel personal. Sometimes it does get personal. We saw what happened with Skip and Shannon, right? Like that started going from, haha, it's just a show, to they're legitimately insulting each other pretty darn quick. And then that's what the brand of the show is, right? It's toxicity, it's anger, it's personal attacks. And there's very few people that actively feel good while watching that. And again, your brand is how you make the audience feel when they're watching your content. So again, if the majority of the sports fan audience doesn't feel good while they're watching your stuff because it's not a good vibe, they're going to go to social media to find something that does make them feel good. They're going to go to Pat McAfee's show. They're going to go to That's Good Sports. They're going to go to Flemlow. They're going to go to Foolish Baseball. Let's see, what's another one? They're going to go to Destroying, right? Like the Undercover One-on-Ones was one of the best videos, like most fun I've had watching a sports video in a long time. And that wasn't on a network. That was on YouTube. I mean, hell, for people that want just like pure X's and O's content, like the real nerdy shit, I would hope that they come to me, because I make the type of content that I don't think you're going to see on TV that much, because it's really hard to make. And there's a lot of hours that go into it. And it's just not practical for a TV network to make the type of stuff that I make. And I use that to my advantage, because if they can't get it there, they're going to come here. And that's what I'm counting on. When you watch one of my videos, you know that probably on average 50 to 80 hours, depending on the subject, went into the creation of that video, at least on the film study ones. This one's obviously going to take a lot less. But generally speaking, as much research as I physically can do has gone into every single video. And it's, me just pouring through playbooks, me pouring through tape, combing through data, sending late night text messages to my coaching buddies and asking very stupid questions and getting remarkably clear answers back that I then have to find a way to translate into English so that I can properly explain how this sport works to people that are just browsing YouTube on a Saturday night, right? And that takes a long time. And that every time you watch one of my videos, I am not just talking out of my ass. Like, that is my brand, is doing the work, doing the research. And even if my take is wrong, I have a reason for why I say what I say. And so even though my brand does not lead to a lot of volume in terms of posting, it does mean that every time I post, people come back because they know that I put in the work to say what I am saying, right? And that's a great spot, I think, for my brand to be. And that's exactly where I want it to be. I make content for nerds because I am a nerd. And my content will never be at the top of the sports media pyramid. And I'm totally okay with that. I don't want to be at the top of the pyramid. It's fucking lonely up there. I'd rather be down here on the bottom rung with all the other nerds so that we can just talk about football. Like, that's where I love to be. And I hope I stay here forever. Because the farther you get up the ladder, boy, the longer you can fall. So I'm good staying down here. Truly, I am. Now, transitioning over to the network side of things and how they are prioritizing these individual brands. One of their only shows that year over year is doing better every single season is NFL Live. And they probably make the closest thing, at least on TV, to the content that I try to make, right? Like, it's four smart football people talking about football. And I love that type of content. I watch NFL Live every single show because it's the only thing I truly enjoy watching on ESPN. And I do think that the reason why that show has been successful is because the individual brands of the people on that panel, whether it's RC, Mina, Swagoo, Dan, those individual brands cut through the noise of the ESPN corporate brand as a whole, and they draw people in, right? Like, they are an actual draw to get people to watch ESPN content, like me. Like, I don't watch ESPN, but I watch NFL Live. And there's a lot of people like me that don't watch the network, but they watch that show. So when I say that ESPN is now prioritizing, individual, strong, personal brands, they're trying to get more people like the panelists on NFL Live. They're trying to get more Minas and Dans and Marcuses and RCs, right? Because that is how they can try to draw sports fans back under their overall umbrella. And they're going to get those individual personal brands from outside of ESPN. The people that have built those brands outside of their influence, they need to bring them back under the tent. That's why they're getting Pat McAfee. That's why I would bet a pretty good amount of money that they're at least exploring bringing in Shannon Sharp, because he is a huge personal brand in his own right. Like, I'd bet there's some sort of deal on the table for them, getting Club Shay Shay, under ESPN, because that's a huge show in its own right. I would bet that within 5 years on Monday Night Football, in the pregame show, we're going to have Tom Grassi doing skits on the Monday Night pregame show. I'd bet that within 5 years, ESPN's draft coverage is going to have Destroying doing undercover one-on-ones with top receiver prospects. Because why wouldn't you? Like, that would be amazing content, not just on TV, but on social as well. I don't know why they haven't done it already, actually. And like, even me, like, my brand is nowhere near the size of Destroying, and it's nowhere near the size of Tom's. But like, I would love if one day one of these networks would let me do my own simulcasts for games, like on this channel, or maybe on the Bootleg channel with EJ, like, whatever. Like, I would take anything I could get to be able to show an NFL game on YouTube, which now there's an NFL partnership with YouTube, so maybe it's more possible now than it was in the past. But I would love to be able to have a sanctioned simulcast of me getting to do color commentary while getting to show the game and being able to stream the game with my audience enjoying it with me. I have no idea what type of legal mechanisms would have to be tripped for that to even be possible, but maybe one day it will be possible, and I can't wait for that day. So, if you're with ESPN or Amazon or NBC and you're watching this, what's up? Shoot me an email. Love to hear from you. Look, sports media over the last 15, 16 years that I've been a part of it, in every role you can think of on both sides of the fence between old media and new media, it's changed a lot. The networks have changed, the content has changed, the people making the content has changed more than anything. Everything's different now, and I mean different in a good way. The democratization of sports media is the best thing to happen to sports media ever. And it's certainly the best thing for the consumer. Bottom line, what all of those changes have led to are both the McAfee acquisition as well as the layoffs that ESPN went through. And it's not that it's two sides of the same coin, but they are two separate paths that ESPN is taking simultaneously to get to the same destination, which is ultimately profitability. Now, if you're a member of the sports media landscape at large, and I mean that in any context, doesn't matter how big your footprint is, whether you're working for yourself or working for somebody else, new media, old media, it doesn't matter. I would love to get your perspective on this down in the comments, because I think it's good to have an industry-wide discussion here, and I know a lot of you are watching this. So again, I would love to get your perspective down below. I see my camera's overheating, so I only have a few seconds left. Go subscribe to my podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast, because again, I don't post a lot of videos on this channel because I physically can't. So if you want more regular content that has a lot less hours that go into production, go check out the podcast channel. Again, Bootleg Football Podcast. We have an episode coming out every single day that is a deep dive on all 32 teams and all 8 divisions leading up to the season. So if you want to get ready for the NFL season in the most well-researched way that we could put together, go check out Bootleg Football. And also follow me on Threads. That's a new thing now. And I'm probably going to end up leaning a lot more into Threads than I am on Twitter during the season, because Threads is a lot better for image sharing. And I'm going to be doing a lot more like stadium photography and sideline photography this year, especially because I'm working with the Chargers now. So if you like all my football photography, go follow me on Threads, follow me on Instagram. All that's going to be posted there. All right, I got like 5 seconds till the camera dies, so I will see all of you next week, probably, maybe. I don't know. I'm not gonna make any promises. I'll see you all soon.